district on this Monday, August 13th, 2018. Mr. Brooks will record the members present or absent, and we do have Mr. Farrell joining us via FaceTime and Sean Miller joining us via phone. So we do have a quorum, so please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then we'll do the oath of office for candidates. We stand by the flag. Did you want to get a picture of the oath of office? So if you raise your right hand, and then I'll read the oath, and then you'll affirm with the I will. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota, that you will faithfully and impartially perform your duties as a member of the school board of the Madison Central School District, Lake County, South Dakota, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified?
Can you plug me in?
Okay.
No, we use a wireless projector. I have an idea. Actually.
Okay. Item number 5 is the approval of the agenda, and there is one change. It's at an additional request to hire, and so that will be under item number 9, the personnel action, and the additional request to hire will be adding Katie Abraham with the freshman girls
Do you mind coming over here and doing
at
that?
$29.90.
Because I might be.
Okay, so with that one change, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda, the updated agenda.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Farrell. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hanamichael. Further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
I do have one.
Aye.
Oh, sorry. Do we have somebody that was Megan gonna do that?
She'll be on leave.
So is she gonna coach until then, or is just Katie taking the whole thing
They'll
over?
probably do co-coaching.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Motion carried, and we're on to item number 6, which is
Can you
the
hear us,
approval
Sean?
of consent agenda
Have
items.
PowerPoint up here
7
with
through
Ken's
10.
voice, like we had before.
Item number 7 is
Yeah,
the
probably.
minutes for the July 12th regular and annual meetings. Item number 8 is the approval of bills, which myself, Mr. Hanamichael, and then Leah Cecil reviewed at 5. Did any of you have any questions? Item number 9 is the personnel actions. Would you like to?
We have a number of personnel actions to go through. Request for hire Jerry Yonke as middle school physical education to replace Stacy Anderson at $41,080. Also has middle school track level 7 to replace Stacy Anderson at $1636, and as 8th grade boys basketball coach level 6 $1,178 to replace Jacob Giles. Michael Ricky at assistant varsity football level 3 at $3,114. Ashley Meddy as middle school volleyball 7th grade level 7 $1,636. Rob Graham head varsity tennis girls level 3 $3,114. Mitchell Brooks assistant varsity basketball girls level 3 $3,114. Liz Gores cheerleading advisor boys and girls basketball level 7 each at $1,636. Tom Nielsen assistant varsity football level 3 $3,114. Ross Huska assistant varsity boys basketball level 3 $3,114. Gina Fritz assistant varsity track level 4 $2,990. Matthew Gross, DeClam High School, Orland Turk, level 3, $3,114. And Katie Abraham, freshman girls basketball, level 4, $2,990. And then contract changes, we have 5. Kristen Hildebrandt will move from BA to BA plus 15 at $42,200. We have 5 that obtained their masters. Jennifer Englert from BA 15 to MA 15 at 48,538. Laura Haug from BA 15 to MA plus 30 at 48,252. Terry Gary from BA plus 30 to MA plus 30 at 53,594. Marcella Hoffman from BA 15 to Masters at 46,555. And Jill Cradaville from BA 15 to MA 15 at 47,497. The open enrollment application is actually a second grader who is already going to school here. They moved into a different area, so it's a request to continue here.
So I'd entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 7 through 10. So moved by Mrs. Cecil. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Schultz. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carried, and on to item number 11, which is the hearing of delegations and written communications. I don't believe anyone is here to address the board, so we'll move on to item number 12, the administrator reports.
Just got a handful of items. ASBSD and the SASD convention was held this last Thursday and Friday in Sioux Falls. I believe there were over 500 that were signed up for the conference, which was a good number. A few highlights from the conference. Attorney General Jack Lee kicked off the Stand Up for School Safety program, and we'll be talking more about that later. SRO Grant and Police Chief Meyer will be presenting information on this program to our staff on Thursday. Mr. Hanweick presented at the conference on cybersecurity. Dr. Cook was recognized and received his middle school Outstanding Principal of the Year award at this. And Mr. Farrell was also recognized as the new president of ASBSD for the 2018-2019 school year. Some project updates. Parking lots are done. North tennis court's been resurfaced, looks good. The high school sidewalk you maybe saw up front is completed. Elementary repairs on the sidewalks have been completed. We have some flooring in the middle school. You see today, I want to thank the city crew. They're getting the crosswalks all marked and they're looking good. So I'd like to thank them they've done that every year, and it's sure appreciated that they redo those for us. And I think we need to point out too the great work that Mr. Hanson and his custodial staff have done. Their facilities are looking great. So upcoming events this week, we have new substitutes meeting tomorrow. And then we get started, new staff in services Wednesday. And then Thursday, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday will be staff in service for all staff. First day of school, open house 22nd, first day of school 23rd. Goal setting retreat 27th. And the chamber educator reception is August 29th. Some of the items that will be covered during our in-service include emergency plan update, Title IX, social media and FERPA presenter, teacher mentoring, NWA training will be talked about, high school, the new social studies curriculum training, middle school literature training, elementary will have a dyslexia speaker, we'll have EpiPen training going on, Stand Up for School Safety campaign will get started, principals will have meetings with their staff, board president will meet with the staff, I'll meet with the staff, education foundation president, business official will meet, and then on the Tuesday we have VJ Smith coming at the end of the day to sort of have a kickoff presenter to wrap up in service. He's an excellent speaker. The policies that we have for the second reading, there were no changes in what was posted. We will look at probably one change to the form about the use of school buses because it talks about civil defense. I think we'll change it to emergency management. That was brought up. Mr. Farrell noticed that. And then the other policies that are first readings, they were ones that were under review. There's some pretty minor changes. Last two things, summer lunch program. I think Mr. Brooks mentioned that they also passed out the Lake County Food Pantry handed out 166 backpacks and school supplies as well that last week, so that was great. So I'd like to thank them for their work in this as well. And then coming up shortly, we'll have a 5-minute, or maybe it's 45-minute presentation from Mr. Hubbard and Mr. Powers on our demographic study that was commissioned a couple months ago. So that's what I have for you.
have a few items.
Okay.
You know, in the previous week passed the adult meal price at $3.55 or state rate. The state came in, we have to charge $3.60. Just kind of letting you guys know that, so it's $3.60. But on the good news, milk prices have went down, so instead of 45 cents for an extra milk, it's 35 cents for an extra milk. So that's a nice change. I did want to report a little bit on the summer food service program. I don't have the complete detail, but in the first 43 days of serving, we served 2,996 meals. That's averaging 70 meals a day. We still had 8 more meals that came in after that. Last Friday was the last day on that, but we were able to staff it well. We had good participation. We'll have a meeting coming up here next week or so to kind of review what was done and then start taking the items and ideas for next year's program. As it turned out financially with that program, they send you a reimbursement. We got in more than we had paid out, but with that program, we can't make money, so we'll end up sending any additionals back once it's all said and done. So we end up at a break even, which is very good. I did want to report also, just real fast, last year was our first year we moved Infant Campus, the online payment system, and so that was kind of new, and so we kind of ran some year totals. We have 700 plus families, 356 families made online payments through that portal, for a total of about $203,000. 60% of our payments came in through that portal, and that was in its first year, so that's a pretty interesting statistic. That's all I had.
Very good. Mr. Shaw, Ms. Lucy, do you guys have anything for the administrator reports?
I have just the enrollment projections at this point for the school year. And again, I remind everybody that these numbers are pretty soft until probably the Tuesday after Labor Day. Junior kindergarten right now, we're expecting 27. Kindergarten 82. First grade 99. Second grade 63. Third grade 86. Fourth grade 91. And fifth grade 105. And as Mr. Jorgensen said, as you walk through the building, you'll see us just about ready to go and making plans for all those kids in the spots that they'll be.
And you're fully staffed and.
We are fully staffed, ready to go.
We too are also fully staffed, ready to go. I actually just wanted to let the board know I'll be back in September to discuss the new graduation requirements that are coming through the state. They've gone through just about every board. There's one more board that has to approve them and put the stamp on them. So once that goes through on the 20th of August, I'll come back and do a presentation for you and kind of go through the new changes. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Tammy, could I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Mr. Jorgensen talking about the convention failed to mention that the new president of the School Administrators of South Dakota is Mr. Joel Jorgensen of Madison Central also.
Gosh, man.
I maybe meant that on purpose.
Very good.
Very good.
All right. Item number 13 is the ICS consulting report.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I met most of you, but my name is Mike Hubbard. I'm with ICS Consulting out of our Sioux Falls office. It's one of 5 in the region. ICS Consulting, we are not an architectural firm, we are not contractors. We are a company of technical professionals that provide customized planning, facilities planning, as well as project-related consulting, management, and advocacy services. A few months back, I think it was towards the beginning of the year, my education consultant and I were down here meeting with Joel, just talking about the great things that are happening in your community, and he just expressed a desire to maybe get his arms wrapped around of future enrollment and what that might look like in the district moving forward. So as such, we offered up our consultant partner that we use when we do our long-range facilities planning and to commission a demographic study. Now, we practiced this earlier today, all this technology, to make sure it was going to work, but found out that I can't approve us to put it up here on Skype unless I'm in my computer in my office. So we've kind of gone around technology, and we do have John. He can only hear us through my phone, but we can hear him, and we have the presentation up here, but he can't see our presentation, so he's going to tell us when we need to go ahead and flip the slide. So John and I have done this a lot of times in Minnesota and South Dakota. I'm pretty much just going to turn it over to him and let him run with it. If you got questions, great. It's going to about 45 minutes with the last part of it that we'd like to show you just on some of the past demographic studies and how they turned out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and go ahead and turn it up for me.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
we can. Go ahead.
Mike,
We're working. We are. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, we're getting a feedback time. Well, it's one of these interesting things where it's hotter here in Duluth, Minnesota than it is by Lake Superior than it is down the prairie of Madison, South Dakota. It's actually beat by 5 degrees. Appreciate it the other way around. Appreciate this opportunity to work with the school district. As Mike has indicated, we've worked on a lot of different projects in Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota, and Wisconsin. We'd like to think that we're starting to get a sense of how population and demographics work and how it works through enrollment projections. I'll walk through this one with you, and it'll be a little awkward taking questions on the fly. We'll probably hold them until the end unless there's really something urgent, and then Mike will jump in on the phone and let me know. Go to the second slide. This is just a quick overview. Most of this information, you folks know, you live there and you've been going through this process, but your enrollment overall in the last 10 years grew 2%, but that's a little deceptive in that it dipped to a low point in for about 3 years. Then it started dramatically increasing. And a good part of the reason why it grew is because your resident student enrollment was also starting to grow after that period of time. And that's a key thing because it reflects people coming into your community with children in those households. It's a real noticeable change in your demographics. Your non-resident students open enrolling into the district is not a huge factor. 50, 60 kids bounces within a range is not a big factor. You do lose students to open enrollment, and we'll talk about that in a little bit some detail. And it's a relatively hefty number, but it's what I would say for the most part based on geography, where parents might work differently from they live here, but they may live in work in another district, or maybe they they live in your district but went to school as kids in another district and want their children to be over there. It's not a huge factor either way in your particular district. The biggest thing is that fourth bullet down there, where the number of K-12 students living within the district, regardless of which district they go to, that's grown by almost 6%. And that's key. People are moving in with children. The other one, you look at down a couple more bullets, is that the percent of those resident students who end up enrolling at your schools declined from 87% down to 81% at that midpoint. They were there, they were going down a little bit, but you weren't capturing them. But that changed 4 or 5 years ago, and you are now increasingly getting more of those resident students attending at Madison. So you got a couple different demographic factors going on here. Resident population enrollment is increasing, and you're starting to capture more of those students than you had been. The key thing is, looking at down the road, is that your local economy is healthy, it's diverse, and it's growing, and it's been especially driven by the specialized programming at DSU. I have looked at a lot of small towns in these states. I have to say you are unique in this sense of having that type of specialized, education-driven economy going in that small community, plus all the other diversity of your manufacturing and the ag. You are in a very good point. Long story short, your K-12 enrollment is expected to increase by a little over 9% to something around 1,360 by the 27-28 school year. Next slide. Just a quick overview at a lot of different things when we do a projection. The main elements are we look at the pattern of student enrollment change within the district, what are the dynamics within your district. Then we look at what's going on around you, and that's particularly important with open enrollment exchanges. Are the districts growing or shrinking? How's the open enrollment exchanges going on? Is that going negative for you or positive for you or holding steady? Then we look at the economic activity, population change, development pattern, and projections of those. So I talk to people in your area, what's happening, what they think will be happening, and how that would impact on population. And finally, I look at the pattern of births relative to your district kindergarten enrollment. Project those births using state-provided projections and some analysis of that to get a sense of that really tough little estimate, which is where's your kindergarten class is going to be 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Next slide. This is just some historic information. This is your K-12 enrollment, 08, 9 through 17, 18. I'm using, by the way, K-12 and not K-1-12 at this point, because your K-1 program didn't kick in until the last couple of years. So for data consistency, it's just K-12 with this information. And you can see that you had banana down to a low point and then started steadily rising, and that it was being driven by an increase in your resident students enrolled in the district. And down at the bottom of the green line, your non-resident open enrolled in, just at a pretty steady state, moving within a range, but not really a major factor. Next slide. These are just the numbers, and you can see across the board here. There won't be a test on this. There's no reason to go into any more detail. You can see that these are the basic numbers of the past. You can see your splits on the K5, 6, 8, 9, 12 over time. And again, everything kind of went down and then started rising back up. And we'll start looking at some of the factors for that being driven are people, not just more kindergartners coming in, but just more kids coming in across a whole range of classes. That's the key part of it. The next slide is a chart that compares your K-12 resident pool. These are the students who live within your district, no matter where they go to school, compared to the resident students who actually enroll at Madison Central. And you can see there's that there's that gap. You do lose students to open enrollment. Back 10 years ago, you were capturing 87% of the students. At the midpoint, the lowest point, you were capturing maybe only 81% of the students. Then that has started to increase back up to 84%, so that's a positive trend line now in these last half dozen years, where now you're on the uptick in terms of retaining the students who live within your district, and there's more of them living in your district, so that's a double positive. And the numbers at the bottom just show you the total pool, and then the number that were actually enrolled in your district. Next slide. Let me get to that. Open enrollment. The top graph, the chart, just shows your exchanges for the last 3 years with your major districts around you. The chart at the bottom shows for a 9-year period. And you can see that information you know pretty much. You do lose students. Chester is your main outflow. It's your main inflow, but it's also your main outflow. That number is weird, and we'll talk about that in the next question.
Oh, you lose him?
You still there?
You still there? You still there? You still there? You still there?
He is not. Hold on. Did he show back up yet?
Well, it says he's still connecting.
John?
Yeah.
We Oh, there he is.
Am I back with you?
Yep, you're back.
Yep, you're back, sir. Somebody here and there, so I just cut the line. So the open enrollment, like I was saying, the Chester area, we'll get into some detail on that. Rutland, you're starting to see a little bit decreased outflow, which is good. Oldham, Ramona, also decreased outflow. The others are fairly all insignificant. Just go to the next chart, Mike. And this is your open enrollment out by destination district. And here's the weird, the Chester one, which is weird, and the numbers flummoxed me for a bit, and then Joel and I had a good discussion, and he educated me. And as to the fact that you had the Hutterite colony students within their district, and they all opted for Chester, and then a year later, half of them opted to go to Rutland, and the consequence is you get this weird outflow, which really wasn't an outflow of students, and so things kind of came back to a normal situation. So you still see that your pattern of losses to Chester are their largest, slightly increasing a little bit, but not by much. You can see the Rutland one has come down in the last half dozen years. That's encouraging. Oldham Ramona has climbed a little bit and now has either leveled and maybe coming down, depending upon a little bit of fluctuation. Everybody else is minor. On the grand scale of things, you're a big district. These are, you don't like to lose students, but I think most of these are geographic based and ones that are probably very difficult to retain back. Next slide. This is the open enrollment in, and there you can see the Chester is your largest one, and it's going steadily up. There's that weird little spike with the Hutterite in and out, but bottom line is you are gaining more students from Chester. It's not a big number compared to the number you lose, but it still is a sizable number. Everybody else is under 10, just moving back and forth. Those are minor decisions by one or two parents, households, moving kids around, not major issues at this point. Let's go to the next slide, class retention ratios. A little nerdy, but these are actually key numbers for the projection model. This looks at resident students, and what we're evaluating is the number of students in one grade that become students in the next grade in the following year. A number of one, a ratio of 1.0 means that if you had 50 kids in grade 1 and you had 50 kids in grade 2, that's a ratio of 1. You didn't lose anybody, you didn't gain anybody. Any numbers under 1.0 means you have lost students. Anything over 1.0 means you gain students on those exchanges. The interesting thing here is we're looking at residents. You look at the column that says the last 3, that's the average of the last 3 years, and you see numbers of 104, 101, 99, which is dead heat, 103, even up 1.15. That's a little odd because there's your private school kids coming in after they leave their schools after grade 5. 1.99, 104, 96, 104, 98. These are all great numbers, and these are really indicative that people are moving into your community. You just don't gain resident students across the board like that unless there's a dynamic of people moving into your community. And of course, the reverse would be true in communities that are seeing very outflow. That's not the case for you. The next slide is the same information. It's for the non-resident students. And here, because the numbers are so small in any one grade, Joel and I agreed to basically set them to 1 for all of them. That just neutralizes any weird swings, except for the grades 7 to 8 and 8 to 9, where you have historically picked up students coming into your district, and we determined that historic pattern is a worthy one and might be enhanced by some additional programming of yours, some of your career tech programming. So we kept that gain in there because the numbers, the absolute numbers are still small. These percentages don't bring in thousands of kids, but they do indicate a gain there, and that's what we wanted to show. So that's why that number is set the way it is on that slide of the rules. Important to these numbers is these get multiplied 10 times shift in the projection, and you could have a little weirdness on any one of these could throw your projection to negative into a negative area or to a positive area that really isn't accurate. So I aim to be conservative wherever possible, and this is one way of doing it with the non-resident students. Next slide. What this one does is just puts you into context around you, and you're fairly savvy folks. You're chiming in and you're getting information, you know what's happening, but this helps put a graphic picture to it. You're the largest school district. You can see your decline. This is K-12 enrollment for the last 10 years. So that's an obvious number. The next three, Chester, McCook Central, and Howard, are the next three schools in size. And they all lost students. They were modest declines. These weren't great declines. And they're basically, I don't want to say flatline in the sense of going up, but they're fairly steady state, just slight declines. And then the three smallest districts all had, in terms of percentage, significant gains, and they're on a small numerical base. But they are showing some resilience despite their small size. All looking at an area that is, for a rural area, is hanging in there. And you folks in particular are better positioned just because of the economic activity, and you are the significant, we'll call it the sub-market town with Sioux Falls below you and Brookings to the northeast of you. So this is an indication of overall area that is holding steady with at least one district showing growth, and that's you. Next slide. So the sequence of trying to figure out how many kindergartners and K1 and kindergartners we're going to have in the upcoming years. And at this point, I start looking at what's going on around you in terms of economic development in particular. So I look at census information through 2010, which is now getting dramatically dated, unfortunately. I add in births per year to residents of Lake County and start looking at those patterns. I add in estimates and projections that have been produced by the South Dakota State University Census Data Center. Evaluate those. I, in particular, look at women ages 15 to 44 and compare them against the number of births and get some birth ratios, and pick out several different options of potential births, projected births over the next 10, 15 years, and then look at those, and there's a considerable range. Pick one that seemed to be most appropriate using the average of the birth rates for the last 17 years or so. That seems to provide a figure that provides a consistent number going into the future without being overly exuberant in terms of having too many births. DSU is not a huge college, but it is a large number of students in a small town, relatively. And those women there, those young women there can unnaturally influence the number of young women in a community, not necessarily having births. And so I always have to pay, in college towns, to pay a little attention to that. So I think we've got a pretty good estimate on births coming down the pipe. Next slide. This is a quick review of population information. And what's interesting here is you look at Lake County, you went from 10.5, 11.3, 11.2 drop. Then the estimate for 2017 is a large jump up. And in effect, if you look at the projections for 2020 and 2025, the estimate for 2017 overwhelms them. And the consequence of the projections that the state data center had made earlier probably are no longer operational for you. If the estimate that the census put out for 2017 is anywhere close to being accurate. A huge rebounding from the aftermath of the recession to where you are today. The city of Madison within the district, and I think that's about 75% of the population of the district in the town. You can see that, again, that's a similar pattern of a little decline through 2010, and then this big chunk two are the largest communities in the county. So significant uptick, and the question, of course, is how long does it last? And you can see those numbers at the bottom, our estimated number of students, or number of people living within the district. From 2000 to 2016, they don't have 2017 estimates at that level, but it followed that same pattern. A slight decline through 2010, and then that increase following that. This is just all sorts of people moving into a community. This is all positive stuff. Next slide. So I talked to a lot of people. I talked to people at the university, I talked to people at in economic development at the city to get a sense of what's happening. More importantly, what's likely to happen. You folks are well positioned geographically and economically, which is very, very helpful. Having DSU in the community is exceptional, and the fact that then to have the Stanford folks drop large sums of money to support that unique programming at DSU is very, very special, and it's going to not only create jobs, but it is going to help make that college and that curriculum even more of a force than it is today. And so in addition to your strong education sector, you have a good mix of manufacturing and industrial enterprises and a strong ag sector. Everybody is upbeat. Nobody finds some dark clouds in the near-term future, except housing. And that's no surprise. Housing is an issue in every community we've ever looked at. And you do have some activity going on. The Housing and Redevelopment Commission has built some units. There's a new development that was proposed, but at this time maybe it's been approved. You have a private developer who has created a subdivision. They have another one in the works. And so you have things happening. You do have the college students absorbing some of your off-campus housing. And it's positive to have the kids in town, but it does absorb some of the housing that could go for households with students in them. So there is an issue there. The campus is talking in preliminary stages about a possible new residence hall. If that was built, that would open up private sector housing that's being rented out to students now within the community. So housing is a key issue. And as I indicated later, this projection is a projection of potential. And reaching that potential will depend upon the housing being available across a spectrum of market components, both for affordable workforce housing and then a more upscale housing for professional people and management level people, say at the university or at the hospital. So housing is a key issue. You do have a head start on it, but I think more is going to be needed. Next slide. So now we're getting back to the Berks. See, I've been trying to get some long-distance understanding of your economy and how it might be coming down. On the left side of this slide, in the dark solid line, is Berks residents of Lake County that have occurred up to 2017. After that, they are projected. And you can see that there's basically within the range that's been happening for the last half dozen years, but at the upper end of that range, I feel comfortable with that. The reality, of course, is that in any given year, the numbers will jig and jig all over that average line. These are average births being projected out there. They could jump around 10, 15 on either side of that, but over that time period, that should be the average that should work out too. So it's a growth. It's not a smashing, knock down the walls growth, but it is a very solid perspective for future birth and then future becoming K1 and kindergarten students. Next slide. Assumptions for the projection. We're not changing the school boundary, obviously. We're keeping the open enrollment dynamics pretty much the way they are, with a continued net loss of students, but no major changes in that dynamic. there, as long as more and more housing is there to allow those people to live in the community. The jobs are going to be there, the pull factor is going to be there, can you satisfy it? The incoming kindergarten classes are going to reflect an average sustained level of births to Lake County residents in the mid-130s. In addition, you're going to have continued in-migration of households with preschool children, or who will give birth upon arrival. So, again, that whole birth situation looks very positive for you, and it's going to be hovering in that mid-130s to upper 130s range. Next slide. So this is the nitty-gritty of the numbers. Bottom line is, you're going to see a total K-1-12 enrollment go from your 1248 year last year to something around 1363. A couple of notes. We just had some back and forth in the last couple of days between myself and Joel. You just completed your August registration for K-1 kindergarten, and my original projection, draft projection that I had sent out was a little bit more robust in the kindergarten enrollment by about another 10, 11 kids. And we brought that down to a line with your, closer to your registrations and did it with the K-1. And we also modified the grade 1 for this upcoming year to reflect the best knowledge right now of your potential student enrollment. All the others follow with the dynamics built into my model. You can see your K-1-5 enrollment will go from the 560s up into the 630s. Your 6-8 is going to climb into the low 320s. Your 9-12 is going to stay pretty consistent until some of those larger numbers start rippling through. These are not going to be major ripples, but they will start slowly coming through. Again, you're seeing about a 9% increase in your enrollment overall. Most of that's going to be coming from your resident students. Your non-resident enrollment is going to be pretty much steady state. Next slide. This just repeats a little bit what I told you on holding the August registration of your K-1 and kindergarten students. The other thing is about your K-1 and your kindergarten, the split between them is somewhat arbitrary. I think if you added the two numbers across on the projection, that's your pool of kindergarten students. And it's really a decision based by the parents and by the staff as to student readiness. They're all the same age. They're all 5-year-olds or just over 5 years old. It's just a matter of where they end up in the K-1 and the kindergarten program. So that'll be an ongoing decision point, obviously, making those jury splits. And my numbers are one, but yours, the actual one will be somewhat different based on student readiness in any given year. Next slide. This is just a graphic presentation of the projection. You can see a steady increase, not going off the charts like a rocket, but steady increasing. Increase starting to slow down a little bit in the latter years, but still there. It's always projected to keep going. You can see the average class sizes by group at the bottom, K-1-5, starting in the 90s, ending up in the 105, 106 area. Your 6-8 classes are going to average, they're in the mid-90s now, and they'll end up again just over 100 to 110. 9-12 is going to start just at 100, dip a little bit as some smaller classes work through, and then start climbing back up a little bit in response to these larger, somewhat larger classes coming down through the system over time. Next slide. So, as I said before, I just want to repeat, this projection represents the expected pressure for growth for the area of the district. Before we realize that growth will require additional housing. If that housing cannot materialize for one reason or another, there'll be a dampening on this projection. But the projection does represent the push factor that's there, both from the people that already live in your community to added with the people who want to move into because of jobs and the amenities and the attractiveness of your community. K-1 grade 12 enrollment is expected to grow about 9%, and the number of resident students is driving it up in over 9%, while non-resident enrollment will increase just under 9%. And I think, using the projection, next slide, something I throw out all the time, it's a projection, it's not a prediction, it's built on assumptions, we're getting our best understanding of what's going on in the community, plus what is likely to happen down the pipe. I use smooth lines because I'm using percentages and averages, but we know that there's going to be fluctuations, especially with those K1 and kindergarten class sizes. Just because the quirkiness of when births actually occur within a year, where they occur within the county. You should get the bulk of them, obviously, but sometimes there's off years that there's more in the other school districts than we're in yours, just by the nature of it. I tell the school districts, don't freak out if 1 year is really weird, but if 2 or 3 start coming off differently, especially if they're consistently up and consistently down, then you need to start thinking that maybe something's wrong. Look at the birth information. Maybe some other factor has unfolded that was not foreseen at this time. I try to get the trend of the magnitude correct. Generally, I do, but things do happen, and when they happen, fortunately, you will deal with them. Next slide is the Q&A. And we'll do it as awkwardly as we can, Mike.
I want to turn them down. Let's try something. Can you hear me, John?
I can hear you.
Okay, so let's see if we can do the Q&A without bouncing back and forth. Are there any questions for John on the study, the numbers, the assumptions?
And I think you said one of the big things, not just the housing, but I know there's a lot of questions out there with the Mad Lab and different things, what's gonna bring in for jobs, which again is a factor. As we talk, I'm not sure how we can factor all those things in right now.
Right. And that's where some of that, assumptions, it is a projection. We're trying to get an order of magnitude, but yeah, there are assumptions that need to be made within the projection. We bring as much science into it as we can in statistical analysis. So, I mean, you could almost argue, I think, on one side that with some of the other things that are going on within the community, this might be a conservative assumption, but again, like John said, it really boils down to housing. If you get somebody that comes in and builds a lot of, single family or multifamily housing, that, it's affordable, you'll see the numbers and more. So, John, I guess I'm answering your question for you. Did I?
Answer it well.
Okay.
Just a question on the open enrollment numbers. Is there any data as far as what grades, or is it kind of just average across the board that were that big differences in the students were losing?
Did you get that one, John?
It was kind of a mumble.
Yeah, I hate to carp on South Dakota. Here in Minnesota, I have a wealth of information through that type of analysis at the tip of my fingers. In South Dakota, I can't get that information. All I can get is total movement between districts. I try to even get it just kindergarten students to get a feel for that, and it's very difficult to get that information. As Joel knows, I myself cannot ask your Department of Education for the data. I have to go through a school superintendent who makes the request on my behalf to get that information, but the state apparently doesn't even keep it, or that's not right. They have the information, it's probably just not in a format or in a database that can be queried that they can send to people. So unfortunately, I can't answer that. But in general, the consistency of your open enrollment out, and to that matter, everybody, it seems like once somebody makes a decision to come to you or to go to Rutland or wherever, they hold to that because the trends over time are very consistent, except with that Huttering colony working situation. So outside of that, it's not like people are jumping out at, say, grade 7 or making a decision at grade 3. It seems to be they come in and they stay.
And that HUD
Thank you.
That HUD rate number is gonna throw it off by 15 to 20 every year, but it's gonna show it as an open enrollment.
Right. That's why I
Every
wondered,
year.
like, do we have any idea how many of those they are every year? me.
Not very likely.
I'm just curious.
Yep.
I would imagine that's.
Any other questions? So one thing I've, John, I've kind of developed over time, and I've asked him to kind of keep presenting, is the next few slides. I'll just have them, maybe take 5 minutes or so just to run through them. But it kind of goes to, everybody always asks, how valid are these projections? And I just like to let John go through these few slides and just talk about that. Well, go ahead and turn your back up, John, and I'm going to mute.
Okay, and go down to the slide with the cartoon on it, Mike. So if you're hopefully at the slide with the cartoon, how accurate are these projections? And the answer is, we try to be correct in the trend and the magnitude, and usually we're right, or close to being right, but it doesn't. I look back at past projections to get a sense of what went wrong as best I can. So I've gone through a number of those. Go to the next slide with all 6 of them on one slide. So these are the 6 prior projections I've looked at. They're the oldest, some of the oldest ones I've done with good data. They're all in Minnesota except for Washburn. So apologize if I haven't done any. The work we've done in South Dakota has all been with the last 3-4 years, so I haven't had a chance to get a good track record there. So go to the next slide, Mike. This is Grand Rapids. It's in Itasca County. This is north central Minnesota, west end of the Iron Range. It happens to be my hometown, where I've done some of my first work, actually. I love this one because you can see I'm dead on. And I'm not going to quibble with this one anymore. It's a bigger school district, a lot more students, gives you an opportunity to work with percentages and stuff, and you get a pretty good alignment. So I love this one. That's why I always lead with it. Go to the next one, Mike. This is Washburn, Wisconsin. It's in Bayfield County, northwestern Wisconsin, by Ashland, all east of Duluth, on Lake Superior. And here, got it pretty close. Got the right trend, got the right magnitude for the most part for the last few years. And then the actual numbers started rising up. Some students came in. Now, I'm not sure if this is growth in that area or changes in open enrollment. I think it's growth. I haven't had an opportunity to go back. But you can see that, again, generally, if you were making a projection for your schools, you would have been pretty darn close. You wouldn't have maybe made a major investment in a facility, but you also wouldn't have been stretched 10 years out because your facility started out being large enough to handle that unexpected increase at the end. So that's not too bad. Next slide, Mike. This is Greenway. This is right adjacent to Grand Rapids in Itasca County on the Iron Range. The Greenway's in a weird position. It loses buckets and buckets and buckets of students to Grand Rapids, a much larger district right beside it. My first projection is the brighter red line, down, 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 down. The actual, as you can see, decreased and then started decreasing even faster than what I had projected. So I did an update with them, and the update recalibrated things, still went down, and eventually the actuals caught up to that, and everybody was in perfect alignment. Then at the very end, you see that big decrease in the last couple of years. Well, the problem there is that's a one-off. What happened, and you'll see it when I talked about Nashua Keewatin, is that a new principal came into the Greenway district. There was a rebellion among certain students, and there was a massive outflow to the Nashua Keewatin School District as a result. Can't predict that, but it's one of those things that can happen. You see that the projection was generally right in the direction of change, but there were some unique events going on that can cause quirkiness that you can never foresee. The next projection is Speedway Falls. This is up in northwestern Minnesota, close to the North Dakota border. Projection and the actual, pretty close. Projection was a little bit more exuberant than actuality. And what happened here was was the superintendent. I agreed on one of those little formula on ratios of grade changes, and we were both wrong. And something that had always had an increase in history had a decrease. That brought it back down, and then it started building back up again, and whether the actuals and the projection are close. Beef is an interesting one. It's a town a lot like you, with a lot of activity going on, and the economy is booming, but they have the bus workers in from all over the place. There just isn't enough, anywhere close to enough housing in that community for the number of workers that work there. They have Polaris and the Arctic Cat and DigiGeek are huge employers there. But there is one of the formulas just off just a ditch. The superintendent and I agreed to it. We just got tripped up. Next one. This is Nashua Kiwa. This is also on the Iron Range, so you can go from west to east to go from Grand Rapids to Greenway to Nashua Kiwa. Next stop would be Hibbing. You can see my first projection in the bright red line. Hey, things are looking good. This was made when it was projected that there was going to be $6 billion worth of investment in the iron mines on the Iron Range. And everybody was planning for an influx of people, of workers, investment. It didn't happen. It's just now kind of happening. And as a consequence, the actual numbers have dropped. People were leaving. Some mines shut down. I did an update partway through. That was a lot closer to the reality until you get to that little uptick there in the actual numbers at the end. And that's the inflow of the students from Greenway who were upset with the principal, and they all decided to go en masse in a large number to Nashua Kiwa. That number is coming down because after the initial fur, nobody else made a change. So it's just the students that jumped, just going to stay through their career at Nashua Kiwa, and nobody else is making that big jump. And so that will come back down to probably what my projection is about 3-4 years out in the future. Next slide. Deer River. This is just west of Grand Rapids in Itasca County. You can see a pattern here. I've done a lot of work back up in that neck of the woods years ago. The bright red line is my first projection I did for them, showing the declining. It was on track for the first couple of years, and then it went completely different. They just started growing like mad. And they were growing like mad because all of a sudden, that school district was capturing many more births from Itasca County than were going to the other 3 school districts that make up the county. And it came out of the blue. The river's not a big town, and our people. It's a very rural school district, has a Ojibwa reservation on it. It's just not, wasn't going to happen like this, but it did. All of a sudden, the road took up and stayed there. I made the second projection, got close to it. Again, it had an uptick. The area just is growing a little bit more than people anticipated. It would grow in a county that was very, very steady. So, again, this is where you try to get it. Sometimes you don't catch up to where the reality might be. In this case, it was all driven by birds. I think that's the last one. Anyway, the takeaway, last slide, is that these are projections, not predictions. They rely on assumptions and especially open enrollment and births. And usually, as you can see, we're right. We get the trend. We get the magnitude. We're doing this right. But the unexpected can happen. And it can happen with a miscalculation or a misassumption on a grade change or the percentage of births in the county that are coming to that district, and all of a sudden they're not there, or they doubled up. Or economic things happen that cannot be predicted or foreseen until they happen. But I think in your case, again, like Mike indicated, growth is in your forecast. The question is, can you capture all the growth that's going to occur? That's it, Mike.
Any final questions for John? Any final words, John?
No.
Okay.
Good luck.
All right, thanks. We'll talk to you later. So, with that, take the information, mull over it. But ultimately, if you believe it's valid in the order of magnitude and projection, it's something that obviously we need to plan for. Already we're kind of getting a little crowded in some of the sections. So, these are things that, it's not necessarily if you build it, they will come philosophy unless you're talking about housing. But, we definitely want to try and plan for it in the long range. And these are, again, services that we can provide moving forward if you guys, if or when you decide to go down that path. Hopefully this will give you, I guess, a little information, a little guidance on a future vision of what the district might look like.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Item number 14 is
I would have just given you no control. I thought I could do it all from
No,
no, really, I feel bad. The audio and
Good, see it attached.
Worked out fine, worked out fine.
Our committee had met, went through, we had a few plan changes where we changed some deductible amounts and how the shares were done. But these are the recommendations then where they, for rates to change. The net amount ends up being a 5.8% increase to the cost of the plans. The school district contribution through negotiations went from $510 to $540, so $30 a month comes from the school. So a little over probably half of that increase comes from school, and the other portion comes from the employee, mostly on the family side. You kind of see those are the proposed changes on that. I guess to define the table, we have kind of what our plans are. Single plus one family, and we have the rates, what the district contribution is the same than what the employee out-of-pocket would be. Some employees are paid over 9 months, so that's what their out-of-pocket paid over 9. Just divided by 12 times 9. And then we have kind of our dental. We have some basic dental in our health insurance, which is in this rate. And then we have, if they go to a Delta, full-fledged Delta dental plan, it's called the choice plan, what that would cost them. And there's a savings to the health plan if they do that, about $25 per plan. That's why that discount is there for they go that way. So these are the recommendations of the committee. Any questions or thoughts on that? It is within the board's authority to set rates.
Is there a motion to approve the committee's recommendation for the 2018-2019 health insurance rates? So moved by Mr. Hanemichael. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Farrow. Any further questions or discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. Item number 15 is consider approval of the busing proposal from Middletown, Ramona, Chester, and Rutland school districts for the open enrolled students.
And they're the exact same requests as they were last year and the year before. I think they just changed the date on the letter, but so there's no changes in what they've done the last 2 years anyway.
We're just required to do this annually.
Annually, we're required to do it by law.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the busing proposal from Middletown, Ramona, Chester, and Rutland school districts for open enrolled students?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Schultz. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hanemichael. Further questions or discussion? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passed. Item number 16 is consider providing free student meals at the beginning of the school year.
And this, if you remember last year, we did the same thing, and I'll give a little bit of background to this. We have a very good contract with Thrive, our current provider, and then we end up making a decent sized sum over the year on our programs. Our rate that we set is the minimum we can charge by from the state, $2.70. And we have a paid lunch equity tool, which recommends us charging $2.90. But we've done waivers in the past, so we don't have to take our rate up. And I did want to cover, when we do this, there are a few things at the end of the year. It's nice to have, if it's a free, we can get more students in there. If they go there the first few days, maybe they'll stay. In town, we have a number of food service providers that have very good student specials, so that captures a good portion of the high school. With this next year, our meal offerings in the middle school high school has changed quite a bit. A lot more offerings. We're hoping to capture more of the students and more of the faculty. And we thought if we offered this again, we could maybe draw in a few more and get them started, seeing what we offer. I did want to go through, just because questions we come up with is making sure we're maintaining things and not anything old. So in this 2017-18 year, we updated, but we updated floor scrubbers, tables, water heaters, shelving. There was a number of repairs, supplies, and capitalized or non-capitalized equipment. So we spent about $100,000, $100,846 on those items. Just maintaining and repairing. In the prior year, we did walk-in freezers, hot carts, convection ovens, those repairs, maintenance, and then we did the campus system. So that was about $51,000. So we are using our funds to make sure we're staying updated. So when we do this type of thing, we're not depleting ourselves or shorting ourselves or not taking care of issues. When we look at it, it ends up being about $2,800 a day, because this would be for breakfast and lunch. Would be the amount we would not bring in revenue on it. So if we did, and we're just kind of looking at days we can do whatever everybody feels. The first 7 days takes us to August, and September 1st is when we start charging for families, and that would be about $19,600 loss of revenue.
Because we're handcuffed on, we can't set the price lower.
Yeah.
If we could set the price lower, we could do some of that, but we're not allowed to, so this would be another opportunity to
Give back to the families.
give back to the families.
Yeah.
And I think with the new food contract, the 5 different offerings, it's going to be a lot different than the past. I think it'd be a great way to let kids and staff see that too.
Very good. All right, is there a motion to
Well,
approve?
how many,
Go ahead.
we're going to recommend 7 days,
Okay,
because that's the August, but is everybody comfortable with that? I think that would be good, but just want to make sure. So we didn't specify days
Because that would take it through
in August.
through Labor Day, right? So
Yep.
when they come back from Labor Day, they start paying.
Yeah.
Correct.
And if as families come in and out, and it does help with status changes and paperwork turning and money on the accounts and things like that.
Yeah. And then maybe like during the middle of the year, like Christmas time or something, we can, if we still have an abundance of money, can do a free
Yeah.
lunch.
Could visit it again.
Yeah.
That would be good, yeah.
all right, so is there a motion to approve providing 7 days of free student meals at the beginning of this school year?
So moved.
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Schultz, seconded by Mr. Miller. Further questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. And item number 17 is reviewing some handbooks.
First one's the technology handbook. Steve, you wanted to touch on any changes that year?
There wasn't a whole lot of actual changes, mainly just some typos. Originally, it said removable memory cards, and then it just said flash drives, or flash drives. And there was another one, the actual policy had changed its name, so we went ahead and corrected the actual name. It used to be MHS Academic Policy and Procedures, but they changed to MHS Academic Procedures and Policies. And so we just changed that, and that's pretty much all the changes. Everything else stayed the same this year, so everything worked great last year, so
Yeah.
it kept about the same.
In the high school one, I had highlighted the changes. Many of mine were just more, I had to put Mike in the book as the assistant principal and athletic director. A few scheduling changes. Let's see. I did refer back on page 10 of the handbook, under the computer use. I referred back to district board policies just so we could link the the handbook to the policies. Also, Cami sent me an email today. There were 2 errors in my book. If you go down to the bottom of page 10, where it says to participate in graduation exercises, a student must actually have to have 22 credits. Because we made that change when we added the computer science requirement, effective with this graduation class of 2019, they actually will have to have 22 credits to walk through the graduation exercises, not 21 and a half, that used to be previous. They need 22 and a half to graduate, but we allow them to walk at a half a credit short if they're trying to finish something. If they don't, for some reason, take government second semester and don't pass, we will still let them walk and then finish government over the summer, something like that. And then also, on page, I want to say 19, there was just a grammatical error. I needed to drop under the disruptive conduct, there's a fourth violation. Actually, it was up a line. I just dropped it down a line. So, I had debated on making a few changes. Had a conversation with Mr. Ricky about. I think what we want to do is we want to run it a year together to see how things go. We're going to work on delegating of jobs, etc. And then at the end of the year, we'll sit down and we'll take a hard look at some things. And do we want to keep doing this? Do we want to make changes? Obviously, with the graduation requirement changes, we'll have to look at some of those things in the handbook moving forward. And the other thing we're starting a new course this year. We've met with our community CTE board, and one of the things that they talked really heavily about was employability and how do we get kids ready for the workforce world. So we actually opened up an elective employability class this year, and actually I had to add 2 sections of it because we had so many kids jump on it. So we're looking at maybe down the road, if it's functional and it runs well, that we will maybe look at adding that as one more requirement for the kids before they go to graduate. So, but we're going to run it for the year and test the waters and see where it goes. So we're pretty fortunate. Christy Olson used to work in the business field, so she's actually going to teach the class. And then Dan Gandhi is going to help her through the English. So not a whole lot of changes really. It runs pretty well. So. I'm done.
Okay. I thought maybe we had something
You want me
really-
to keep talking?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I prefer that. Very minor changes to the elementary handbook, page 5, just kind of points out that with attendance becoming a bigger and bigger issue across the state, across the country, that chronic absenteeism and truancy is actually referred to Lake County attorney, and it's actually a charge against parents, not students. We just want kids here so they're safe, so they're getting the education that's guaranteed to them. Dress code, as dress trends change, we changed with them a little bit, so we just ask that parents dress their children appropriate so they're comfortable at school and able to participate in what they need to participate in. Internet, we just point out that there is the acceptable use policy also in the elementary, and that they're expected to abide by the guidelines of that appropriate use policy. Our kids don't carry computers home with them, things like that. Social media becomes a larger issue as kids grow up, and it is active in the elementary as well. And then the last one is on page 22, where we just, we like to make parents aware that when their kids have the Go watches and the cell phones, that we ask them that they be placed in their backpacks, and if they become a distraction to kids, that we'll hold them until the end of the day and meet with parents accordingly to make sure that they understand that we don't want to disrupt the education for their student or other students. And we don't want kids to text at recess because we want them to play and burn off some steam.
Yeah, imagine that. Concept.
Very good. Anything else anyone has to add on the handbooks? Okay. Item number 18 then is the second reading of policies JECB, admission of non-resident students, EEAD, special use of school buses, and EEADR, transportation agreement.
And on these from the first reading, there were no changes that were posted. The JECB is actually, was added section 8, which simply talks about, it's a new part of the state law, so we just added that in there. So that's word for word, number 8, same as last month, of what the new regulations are in the state law. So we're just updating the policy so it's up to date with what the state law says. If you go to the next one, Steve, we are proposing that this get changed from what's posted here. If you go down to the fourth paragraph, the only exception to this policy will be in the case of a request by the local civil defense. Rather than by the local civil defense, we just say by emergency management or Red Cross. So we take out the local civil defense because I don't know it's really referred anymore, and we put in emergency management. So we make that change to the second reading and put that in there. Should have caught that the first time we didn't. Mr. Farrell caught that, so would update that. Other than that, it's just allowing the use of the buses that work the colleges, different things like that, so different organizations. And then the next one, the EEAD-R, is just the form paperwork, so we keep track of if they're being used. This is how we're going to track it. And I didn't hear any suggested changes or wording on that either. So what I would propose to adopt on the second reading, these three policies with EEAD, that one change made to refer to emergency management versus civil defense.
So is there a motion in that regard?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Farrell. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hanamichael. Further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. And item number 19 is the first reading of policy IDGJI, interscholastic activities, and IGBK-L, South Dakota High School Activities Association eligibility checklist for alternative instruction students.
And I'd ask Mr. Ricky to review these. On our website, they're under review, it shows. So he looked some stuff up. I asked him to come tonight if he wanted to address some of this. I'll just let him go through some of the changes.
The majority of the changes just dealt with the fact that we still had sixth grade as a participant in middle school athletics, and we haven't had sixth grade participate for about 20 years. So we needed to clean that up. So the first one, instead of 6 through 9, it's 7 through 9. In B there will be selection process to determine addresses on the junior varsity. It was on this sheet, it was called the sophomore team. But it would change to junior varsity is what we have. We don't have a sophomore team. So mostly just all policy or just wording changes there. If you go scroll down on the next page, we just did some updates right there, eliminated all the sixth grade. And then under 7th and 8th grade, it says when we play home games, there will be at least 2 contests wherever possible. And then we struck out if the home team can't play, we'll do a scrimmage. We just don't want to make that mandatory. We do try and do that when we can, but sometimes we don't have enough players to even do that. And then the last part there, it's just some wording things to keep things consistent. Like during practice, all players will receive equal time in individual drills, conditioning, and instruction. Right, and then that's now consistent in 9th grade and junior varsity. And then for the other one, the checklist for eligibility for alternative instruction students. This comes right from the South Dakota High School Activities Association. So what we had in there was a prior checklist, and we're just updating it to a new checklist. The big changes on the second page, Steve. A bunch of this stuff in bold is all added, and that's just all to align with the South Dakota High School Activities Association.
So not added by us per se.
Correct.
This is the Activity Association's new form, which we follow the South Dakota High School Activity Association. We've got to follow there.
And where it's all crossed off at the bottom, that was a change that was just reworded by the South Dakota Activities Association.
I hate doing this, but do you want me to tell you a typo?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Which form?
Well, it's the alternative instruction
Okay.
compliance. I think it's page 2. The bolded, let's see, number 1 being
No,
bold on
it's
the
this one.
first day. It should be of the school year, I think, instead of FO. Just thanks.
First stage.
I'm sorry.
This school year?
Full.
Am I going?
Yep.
Right down, right in the middle of the page.
Okay.
Number 1.
Yeah.
I'll circle here, I got
Got
it. Yeah. And if anyone else sees anything in the next month as well, we'll go through it again. please bring it up. Sometimes we can't just cut and paste theirs because it's not in the same format we have.
Right.
And sometimes they have spelling
And sometimes they have mistakes.
That's
great.
right. That's right.
But again, first readings, making you aware of them. Like even on the first page, it talks about semesters or trimesters. Well, we don't do that, but if we ever change that, it's part of their policy. We're leaving exactly what they have so that we have it covered. Again, there's no action, it's just a proposal first. And again, both of those were under review. We're trying to get all of those off the website.
So additional feedback is welcome on those next.
Absolutely. If there's other feedback or other suggestions, again, let us know. The first one, or the second one, like I say, is basically their form. We will have to adopt their form.
All right. Item number 20 is the adjournment of the regular meeting. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Schultz. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hanamichael. Further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Meeting adjourned.
And if anybody's around Tuesday afternoon, I think at 2:30 is when I have DJ Smith come in, if you want to come in and listen to him.
Tuesday, 2:30.
Next week, Tuesday?
Yep.
Awesome.
It'll be about an hour long, and he's
We're
talking about moving